Windows of a Washington skyscraper reflect the American flag blowing in the wind. On the mahogany desk, an open black folder reveals receipts for lobbying, transfers, and bribes. Tycoon Aaron Whitford watches Capitol Hill from a distance, his fortune looking like a house of cards. A news report echoes, dirty money threatens to bring down one of the country's largest political empires. He closes the window, but the secrets remain lit like torches in the night. In the reserved hall, portraits of past presidents gaze in silence. The air smells of Cuban cigars and expensive whiskey, while discreet footsteps cross the carpet. An advisor leaves a golden key on the table, cold as a sentence. "They know too much," Aaron whispers, hearing the elevator door open without warning. Those who rise up know the coffers, the dossiers, and the betrayals that sustain power. You're about to see how a fortune built in silence can crumble in public. Want to discover the real price of political secrets? Watch until the end, because the dirty money trail in Washington spares no one. If you like stories about power, fortune, and corruption, stay here. Every minute will reveal a piece that the world has not yet seen. Aaron Whitford wasn't born into power, but he gained it by buying silence. From a discreet real estate investor, he became the owner of million-dollar government contracts. His private dinners brought together senators, lobbyists, and industrial magnates. The table was covered with crystal glasses, but each toast hid a bribe. Dark money flowed as silently as the Potomac at night. The walls of the Georgetown office were lined with modern art. But behind a false screen, there was a bulletproof safe full of illegal contracts. There was evidence of agreements that should never have existed. The smell of leather and fresh paint from the folders revealed too many secrets. Aaron called that vault his sanctuary, but it was his sentence. At every charity gala, he appeared as an exemplary philanthropist. Tailor-made clothes, a statesman's smile, fortune displayed like a medal. But behind the scenes, the foundation's bank accounts were being embezzled. The public saw generosity, but inside it was calculated corruption. He knew the more light, the more shadow to hide the empire. The first rumors appeared in the columns of smaller newspapers. A young journalist cited irregular donations without evidence. Aaron laughed, certain that money would buy silence again. But every printed word was a spark that spread. And the empire built on secrets began to crack. Within the Senate, his network ran deep. Politicians owed favors, judges closed cases, contracts flowed. But greed always demands more, and he didn't know how to stop. An aide warned, "The eyes are on us." Aaron ignored it, confident that fortune buys immunity. His marriage was no longer solid. His wife, Clara, noticed phone calls in the early hours of the morning and suspicious trips. Whispers of lovers arose in the luxurious corridors. The shine of the jewels no longer masked the betrayal. Inside the mansion, love had turned into theater. At that time, Aaron was planning the final expansion. Create a holding company that combines technology, oil, and real estate. An empire that would rival centuries-old families of power. To do this, he needed allies willing to get their hands dirty, and Washington was fertile ground for dirty dealings. However, the first signs of collapse appeared in numbers. Discreet audits revealed misappropriated funds. A nearby accountant noticed illegal transfers to tax islands. He hesitated. Betray his boss or save his own skin? The dilemma was a harbinger of a storm. Aaron believed that secrets were eternal. But deleted messages, hidden files, and discreet witnesses don't last forever. Every secret is a debt to time, and when time takes its toll, it takes its toll with deadly interest. Washington was already preparing the charge. On a cloudy afternoon, he walked through the Capitol. Whispered conversations about investigations arose in the hallways. Politicians avoided eye contact as if fate were contagious. The weight of fortune no longer seemed like a triumph, but a prison, and paranoia began to eat away at the tycoon's mind. At night, he returned to the mansion, which was lit up like a palace, but every light on was a reminder to be vigilant. Security guards murmured among themselves, employees exchanged glances. Aaron wondered, who would be the first to betray? The empire shone, but it was about to implode. Aaron Whitford was seen as the face of American success. In Washington, his image graced the covers of business magazines, alongside presidents and CEOs. His fortune seemed limitless, built on million-dollar contracts and political influence, but behind the impeccable facade, the trail of dirty money was already deepening like poisonous roots. In the capital's most luxurious salons, he was received like a king. Senators smiled at his side, lobbyists vied for invitations to his parties, and journalists received expensive gifts to silence uncomfortable questions. Everything seemed perfect. But secrets don't disappear. They just wait for the right moment to explode. Aaron transformed his own Georgetown mansion into a stage for conspiracies. Exquisite dinners blended classical music with whispered billion-dollar deals. Crystal glasses held more than wine, the complicity of powerful men. Each toast was a promise of loyalty, or a betrayal waiting to happen. Behind the gilded curtains, safes hid documents no one was supposed to see. Black folders filled with illegal contracts, secret transfers, and notes from corrupt politicians. Aaron called these papers "my life insurance," but ironically, they would be the ones to sign his final sentence. His fortune seemed unshakable. He invested in tech startups, bought land in emerging cities, and financed entire political campaigns. Washington saw him as a modern-day patron, but every penny carried a shadow: bribes, dark money, fraudulent contracts. The wealth that shone on paper hid fatal flaws. Clara, his wife, no longer trusted his perfect smiles. She realized there was more to it than meetings and trips. Deleted messages on her phone, different perfumes in the car, strange looks at parties. The betrayal wasn't just marital, but also moral. The marriage was a facade, as was Aaron's philanthropy. Little by little, investigative journalists began to sniff out irregularities. An NGO questioned donations made in its foundation's name. Where was the money? Falsified documents attempted to cover up the truth, but stains of corruption are impossible to erase. The sheen of fortune was already beginning to tarnish like rust. In closed meetings on Capitol Hill, senators murmured about unexpected audits. There was fear that documents would leak. Aaron appeared confident, but inside he felt the pressure tighten. His secrets were like time bombs hidden in Washington's basements, ready to explode before the cameras. The empire grew too quickly. Luxury real estate, oil stocks, stakes in security companies. Aaron believed diversification would shield him, but the more he expanded, the more points of vulnerability he created. Excessive power attracts greedy allies and enemies willing to tear it all down. Around that time, a close aide began to grow uneasy. He saw illegal transfers to offshore accounts, opaque contracts, suitcases of cash discreetly leaving the mansion. The dilemma was brutal: remain loyal or save yourself by revealing the secrets. Bought loyalty rarely lasts forever. Meanwhile, lavish parties continued to glitter. Champagne popped, orchestras played, and powerful figures circulated the halls. To outsiders, the empire was untouchable, but in every smile there was suspicion. Betrayal could be in the next glass, the next handshake. Aaron believed he had the system under control. Judges owed him favors, politicians delivered votes, and business people followed his plans. But corruption is like acid. It corrodes even those who manipulate it. He didn't realize that the very network he built was already preparing his downfall, driven by greed. One rainy night, he received an anonymous envelope. Inside were copies of secret contracts and photos of him with a compromising senator. The note read, "The dirty money trail always leads back to you." For the first time, Aaron felt the icy edge of paranoia tear at his skin. From that moment on, he began to distrust everyone. The security guards who protected him, the aides who surrounded him, even Clara. Which of them would sell their trust in exchange for immunity? The mansion, once a palace of power, became a gilded prison. Every shadow seemed to hide a betrayal, yet his ambition remained unabated. Even surrounded by suspicion, Aaron devised new deals. A secret energy contract promised billions, but to sign it, he needed to commit more senators. The game became riskier, and each move left him more exposed. It was a poisoned chessboard. One night, Clara found a dossier hidden in the safe. Photos of transfers, politicians' signatures, bribe receipts. Upon realizing it, she was immediately shocked. The fortune that sustained her luxury was steeped in corruption, and she knew keeping the secret made her an accomplice. Revealing it would seal the end. Newspaper columns once again cited strange financial movements linked to the Tycoon. Now he was no longer an isolated voice. 3 media outlets published reports, and the headlines began to echo on TV newscasts. Public opinion was becoming an invisible enemy, more dangerous than any rival. Aaron tried to control the narrative. Meetings with journalists, public donations, rehearsed interviews. But every word was tinged with suspicion. The Tycoon's brilliance no longer seemed authentic. The shadow of dirty money followed his every step, and the question echoed throughout Washington: how long would his fortune last? Aaron believed he could buy everything: alliances, silence, loyalty. But what he couldn't buy was time. Every secret he kept was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. And that night, the ticking became louder than the clinking of crystal glasses. A private meeting at a 5-star hotel was hastily scheduled. Only 3 men entered the room: Aaron, an influential senator, and a trusted lawyer. On the table was a black folder with secret clauses. There was the contract that directly linked his fortune to political corruption. The lawyer hesitated before opening the document. "If this gets out, there's no going back," he said. Aaron laughed dismissively, believing the power was still in his hands. But deep inside, he felt the pressure turn to fear. Betrayal could come from any side, even from those closest to him. The senator signed without reading, as he always did. But at that moment, something changed. A hidden camera, installed by a repentant aide, recorded every detail: the contract, the bribe, the handshake. It was the missing piece of evidence needed to turn rumors into a public scandal. The dirty money trail now had a picture. Days later, a journalist received an anonymous envelope. Inside were copies of the contract, photos of the meeting, and a message: "Publish or die together." She hesitated, knowing she was challenging an empire. But her thirst for truth prevailed. The article appeared on the front page: Whitford and the collapse of political power. Aaron woke to the headlines splashed across every television screen. His heart raced like never before. The calls began: panicked senators, nervous lawyers, aides asking for instructions. The Tycoon tried to remain calm, but inside, the certainty of his downfall suffocated him. Fortune now was synonymous with ruin. Clara found him in the office, newspaper in hand. "You knew this was going to happen," he said coldly. His silence was the most painful response. There, the marriage ended for good. Marital betrayal was small potatoes compared to the political betrayal that would drag everyone into the abyss. Meanwhile, television showed images of protests in front of the Capitol. Signs read, "Dirty money out of politics." Journalists hunted for answers. Cameras chased armored cars. Aaron could no longer walk freely without feeling the weight of the crowd. His name was synonymous with corruption, his image tarnished. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was paranoid. Employees exchanged glances, some already talking to reporters behind closed doors. Loyalty dissolved like sugar in hot water. Each follower sought survival. And the best way was to reveal the secrets Aaron had tried so hard to hide. One night, Clara received a strange invitation. A secret dinner, arranged by someone who didn't identify themselves. She went, suspicious, and found one of Aaron's aides. He handed her a folder with compromising documents. "Use this before he destroys us all," he said, disappearing into the darkness. The folder contained records of illegal transfers, evidence of bribery, and even personal letters revealing her intimate ties to judges. Clara wept silently. That fortune, which had seemed like a blessing, was a curse. She realized there was no way out, either expose everything or be dragged down into the abyss with her. Meanwhile, Aaron tried to defend himself publicly. He called a press conference. In an impeccable suit, his face firm, he denied every accusation. "Lies from jealous enemies," he said. But his voice trembled, and the reporter's sharp questions exposed fissures. The mask of confidence was slipping before millions. The press conference was interrupted when a journalist displayed copies of the contracts on the screen. The room was shocked. Aaron froze. The silence was more damning than any words. In that instant, his downfall ceased to be a rumor and became a fact. The dirty money trail was laid bare for the world to see. Washington exploded in scandal. Senators rushed to distance themselves. Businessmen tore up contracts. Newspapers published complete dossiers. What was once secret was now headline news. The decades-old empire crumbled in a matter of days, and Aaron discovered the worst truth. No one falls alone. Everyone pulls someone down with them. Official investigations were launched. The FBI raided offices, seized documents, and froze bank accounts. Secret safes were opened on camera. The country watched the spectacle of a tycoon's downfall. Each seized dollar bill was a symbol of betrayal and exposed corruption. The fortune was now evidence of a crime. Aaron sought support from old allies, but every call ended in silence. Politicians deleted messages, business people denied meetings, friends of decades pretended not to know him. He had become radioactive. His presence spelled destruction. The betrayal he had cultivated now came back to haunt him. One silent dawn, he entered the mansion's safe. He touched every folder, every receipt, every document. It was his entire life summed up in dirty papers. He cried alone, not for the money, but for the weight of the lies. The fortune, which had seemed eternal, was now just dust slipping through his fingers. Clara, in another room, watched her sleeping children. She knew their inheritance was tainted. It was no longer wealth, it was a curse. She made a decision. She would hand over the documents to the authorities. If Aaron didn't have the courage to face the truth, she would. Even if it meant destroying the family. The complicit senator, realizing he was also being targeted, decided to speak out. He approached the investigators and offered to plead guilty in exchange for immunity. His words were a stab in Aaron's back. The tycoon, who had always believed he controlled the game, was now merely a pawn being sacrificed in the name of political survival. The media released excerpts from the plea bargain. Millions in bribes, fraudulent contracts, illegal lobbying. The country was shocked. The words echoed like gunshots in a public square. The Whitford name, once synonymous with prestige, was now remembered as a symbol of corruption. The fall was beyond repair. Aaron realized that his greatest weapon was also his greatest weakness. The secrets he'd accumulated, the contracts he'd kept, the vaults full of papers. Everything was turning against him. What he'd thought was a shield had become a sword, and each document revealed was a cut that bled his empire. That night the mansion was surrounded by cameras and protesters. Flares illuminated the windows. Signs trembled in the hands of the crowd. Inside, Aaron felt like a prisoner in his own palace. Luxury didn't mean protection, but exposure. His gilded prison began even before the handcuffs. Clara summoned courage and sought out a trusted reporter. She handed over some of the documents she had kept. "The world needs to know the truth," he said. The journalist thanked her and left with the folder in hand. At that moment, Clara sealed her husband's fate, and perhaps her own. Betrayal became justice. The FBI returned to the mansion with a search warrant. Rooms were ransacked, safes opened, computers seized. The scene was broadcast live on television. Millions watched in disbelief at the spectacle of ruin. The fortune once envied was now a source of ridicule. The fall of a tycoon became national entertainment. Aaron watched from the balcony as boxes of documents were carried in. The crowd's shouts echoed like a premonition of condemnation. "Thief! Corrupt!" He closed his eyes, trying to remember when it all began. Deep down, he knew. His own greed had opened the door. Secrets had only completed the job. The investigation revealed an even more explosive detail. Among the documents were records of transfers to international figures. This wasn't just American corruption. It was a global network of dirty dealings. Aaron's downfall could drag governments, companies, and allies across borders. The scandal was becoming global. The next morning, newspapers in London, Paris, and Tokyo splashed his photo. "American corruption tycoon exposed." Washington became a global stage for shame. The fortune, which had seemed untouchable, was now being studied as an example of a downfall. Each country analyzed the documents, seeking its share of the dirty money. Aaron was called to testify. The press crowded the courtroom, men in suits, cameras in hand, microphones shoved in his face. He walked with a stony expression, but his eyes betrayed panic. It was the turning point, from the throne to the dock in a matter of weeks. In court, prosecutors displayed copies of the contracts, photos of the meeting, and bank statements. Each piece of evidence was a blow. The lawyers tried to argue, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. Aaron sat there, barely able to breathe. The collapse of the empire was no longer a hypothesis. It was an indisputable reality. Clara watched it all from the front row. Her eyes were dry, without tears. There was no more love, only disillusionment. She remembered the nights she believed she was living alongside a business genius, but she discovered his fortune was just masked corruption. Now she was witness to the end. Newspapers were broadcasting live. Whitford at the center of the biggest political financial scandal of the decade. Washington was seething. In the streets, people demanded punishment. In the Senate, longtime allies denied even knowing his name. The political betrayal was complete, and Aaron understood. He wouldn't survive the storm alone. He thought of his children, of the legacy he would leave. Everything was tarnished. Everything was ruined. There was no empire to inherit, only shame. The fortune, which should have protected generations, was becoming a curse. The turning point had arrived, and with it, the certainty that there was no turning back. The conspiracy against Aaron didn't spring from thin air. It grew like a shadow in silent corridors. Former allies realized the tycoon was now a dead weight. The more he fell, the more he dragged down those close to him. Washington, a city of secrets, has always known how to turn loyalty into a knife in the back. The senators who had once toasted his side began plotting his destruction. Discreet meetings took place in hidden restaurants. Reports were exchanged like poison pens. Every detail of his fortune was now under scrutiny. The political power that protected him became a silent tribunal against him. Trusted businessmen devised strategies to save their own skins. Some sold shares before investigations froze their accounts. Others publicly broke contracts as if they had never benefited. Corporate betrayal was inevitable. Aaron's empire no longer had partners, only potential executioners. Inside the mansion itself, servants whispered conspiracies. Some were already recording conversations, others photographing hidden documents. The FBI needed no effort. The evidence reached them through interested hands. Aaron realized that his gilded prison was also a stage for espionage. Even the silence seemed wiretapped. Clara no longer slept in the same room. She avoided him, cold and calculating. She kept secrets that could determine her future. For Aaron, his wife had become an intimate enemy. In her eyes, there was no fear, but determination. She knew that his downfall meant her own liberation. Meanwhile, the press fueled the conspiracy. Daily headlines painted Aaron as a modern-day monster. TV shows featured infographics about his obscure fortune. People watched fascinated, as if it were a television series, but it was real, and each episode brought the Tycoon closer to ultimate collapse. One of his lawyers, pressured by threats, decided to cooperate with investigators. He handed over copies of contracts and recordings of private meetings. It was the most painful betrayal, paying for loyalty and receiving stab wounds. Aaron realized there was no wall high enough to contain revealed secrets. The conspiracy grew within Congress. A special committee was created to investigate corruption in public contracts. Each testimony was a brick in the wall surrounding him. Aaron watched helplessly as politicians who were once his partners were now his accusers. The downfall had become a national spectacle. In the darkness of his office, Aaron began to hear non-existent noises, doors creaking, voices whispering. Paranoia gnawed at his mind. He knew he was being watched, recorded, betrayed. He no longer trusted anyone. Even the reflection in the mirror seemed to mock him, reminding him that a lost fortune is also a destroyed identity. A gala dinner turned into a trap. Aaron was invited by allies to show his strength, but in the brightly lit room, he noticed cold stares. Conversations ceased as he approached. The social betrayal was clear. He was the phantom guest, an unwelcome presence. The man marked for sacrifice. Federal agents intensified the pressure. They leaked selective information to the press, creating a narrative of inevitability. Each day, a new detail emerged. Hidden accounts, suspicious trips, photos with accomplices. Aaron tried to deny it, but it was futile. The conspiracy was complete. Truth and lies mingled until they suffocated. A longtime partner, Michael Graves, became a key player. He kept documents about international contracts. For years, Aaron trusted him as a brother. But under pressure from prosecutors, Michael broke his silence. He handed over files linking the Tycoon to illegal operations on 3 continents. The betrayal had a name and a face. Aaron, furious, tried to confront him. He called several times, but never got an answer. Finally, he received only a short message: "I'm not going down with you." The Tycoon's heart sank. Michael was more than a partner. He was an accomplice. Now he was a witness for the prosecution. The conspiracy was no longer a shadow. It had become a dagger. Inside the mansion, Clara discreetly gathered lawyers. She planned to legally separate her name from the company's. She wanted to save what she could for her children. Aaron found out and confronted her. "Are you going to betray me too?" he asked. She simply replied, "I've already been betrayed." It was the final blow to the Tycoon's heart. The FBI intensified surveillance. Black cars circled the mansion. Drones flew overhead. Neighbors watched curiously, like spectators at a tragic spectacle. Aaron felt every movement as a threat. His house was no longer a home, it was a stage. The conspiracy had transformed his life into a public theater. Within Congress, secret documents mysteriously leaked. Aaron's signatures appeared on defense contracts, energy concessions, and suspicious privatizations. Each piece of paper was irrefutable evidence. Journalists described it as the definitive dirty money trail. The Tycoon saw his name become synonymous with political corruption. In clandestine meetings, lobbyists discussed how to cut ties with him. "If we stay connected, we'll all sink," one of them said. The conspiracy was no longer just against Aaron, but for collective survival. He had become a scapegoat. necessary so that others could remain untouched. The collapse approached like a storm. International investigations began. Swiss banks froze accounts. Companies in London and Dubai broke contracts. Fortunes evaporated like smoke. Aaron, once the lord of power, was now a beggar in his own empire. And everyone watched in complicit silence his slow agony. One morning the phone rang. It was an anonymous message. "They're going to destroy you tomorrow." Aaron froze. He didn't know if it was a threat, a warning, or a trap, but he knew it was true. The conspiracy had reached the point of no return. The clock was ticking, and the downfall would be broadcast in prime time. Clara discreetly packed her bags, not to run away with her husband, but to leave before ruin. She looked at her children and said, "You deserve a life away from this." It was her final decision. Marital betrayal became official abandonment. Aaron would lose not only his fortune, but also his family. The Tycoon still tried to maintain a semblance of control. He gathered lawyers, asked for strategies, and considered counterattacks. But every suggestion seemed futile. The system was already stacked against him. It was like fighting the tide with his bare hands. Too many secrets, too many betrayals, and a conspiracy bigger than any empire. One night, he found an anonymous letter in the garden. "Your fortune was made of shadows. Now the shadows swallow you." Aaron tore the paper, but the words echoed like a sentence. The Tycoon, who believed he dominated Washington, was now a prisoner of his own choices. The conspiracy had already won. The night seemed perfect in Washington. In the gilded ballroom of one of the city's most luxurious hotels, chandeliers twinkled like stars strung on the ceiling. Politicians, businesspeople, and celebrities gathered for a charity gala dinner. But amid the smiles and raised glasses, the conspiracy was about to rear its ugly head. Aaron arrived surrounded by security. He wore a tailored suit, his posture rigid, his expression forced. He knew he needed to exude confidence. The press recorded his every step, flashbulbs illuminating his weathered face. He still believed he could control the narrative, but that night would plunge him into the abyss. Clara appeared in a bright red dress, immediately drawing attention. She wasn't there to support her husband, but to witness his downfall. Her gaze held the firmness of someone who had already made her decision. She knew the fortune built on secrets was about to crumble before everyone's eyes. The guests whispered among themselves. Some avoided greeting Aaron, others exchanged nervous glances. It was social isolation turned into a spectacle. He was the center of the party, but not as a host, as a defendant. Each toast felt more like a veiled judgment than a celebration. On stage, a senator was giving a speech about ethics and transparency, pure irony. As he spoke, reporters prepared their weapons, headlines ready, dossiers in hand. The dinner was just a facade. Behind the scenes, evidence was about to be revealed. The conspiracy chose that moment to carry out the sentence. Aaron tried to smile and feign normalcy. He chatted with business people, praised projects, and raised toasts. But their looks were cold, their answers short. He perceived the separation as silent stabs. Every word of support rang false. The Tycoon was alone in the crowd. Suddenly, the screen in the hall lit up. Images of secret contracts, transfers, and documents signed by Aaron appeared. An immediate silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to him. It was as if the world had stopped to watch the spectacle of the fall. The climax had begun. The senator on the stage froze in surprise. Reporters rose. Cameras swiveled toward Aaron. The image of him signing illegal lobbying clauses played on a loop on the screen. The Tycoon stood motionless, the crystal glass trembling in his hand. There was no denying the undeniable. A businessman, once his ally, murmured loudly, "We always knew." The whisper became a chorus. Masks fell, and everyone freed themselves from the influence they had once feared. The hall became a courtroom. Aaron was no longer a tycoon. He was an exposed criminal. The fortune that had sustained him now buried him in shame. Clara watched in silence, her eyes fixed on her husband. There was no joy, only resignation. She knew her doom was sealed. The red dress seemed a symbol of blood spilled by betrayal. In that moment, she was a witness and a silent accomplice to the conspiracy unfolding before the entire country. The guests began to leave the ballroom. No one wanted to be seen with him. Photographers captured every gesture, every expression. Aaron tried to maintain his composure, but his sweat betrayed his panic. His once celebrated fortune was now synonymous with decay. Washington devoured him like a beast before wounded prey. The press invaded the space, ignoring protocol. Microphones advanced on him, questions sharp as razors. "Mr. Whitford, how do you explain these documents? Is it true you bought votes in Congress?" The tycoon stammered, unable to answer. Every silence was interpreted as a confession. The climax was public and cruel. Outside, protesters chanted. They held signs, "No corruption! Arrest the thief!" The sound echoed into the hall, mixing with the incessant flashes. Aaron realized there was no escape. The world knew. His secrets had become headlines, and his fortune was evidence against him. Security guards tried to remove him discreetly, but cameras followed every step. He emerged surrounded, like a criminal on the run. The crowd insulted him, spat at him, and pointed fingers. The man who had once bought applause now bought contempt. The political and social betrayal was complete, and there was no turning back. Outside, a reporter revealed even more. Documents revealed accounts in tax havens and evidence of international bribery. The scandal was taking on a global dimension. It was no longer about Washington, but about a dirty empire connected to the entire world. Aaron became a symbol of international corruption. In the armored car, he breathed heavily. The heavy silence seemed more torturous than the screams. He remembered the first negotiations, the first dirty dollars accepted. Each choice had been a step toward this moment. The conspiracy didn't destroy him alone. He engineered his own downfall. Clara, still in the ballroom, was surrounded by journalists. "Did you know?" Questions cut like knives. She simply replied, "The truth always comes out." It was the phrase that sealed her husband's fate in front of the cameras. At that moment, she stopped being the wife of a tycoon and became a symbol of resistance. As the car sped through the streets, Aaron saw Washington's buildings illuminated. Every window seemed to be gazing at his ruin. The Capitol, once the seat of his power, now bore witness to his shame. The empire he had built with dirty money was crumbling before the country's eyes. The climax was irreversible. The morning after the scandal, newspapers around the world carried the same image. Aaron Whitford leaving the salon, his face drawn, surrounded by security. The caption was relentless: "The dirty money tycoon." Washington was waking to a new day, but Aaron had already lost everything. The FBI held a press conference. Agents displayed stacks of seized documents, illegal contracts, suspicious transfers, bribe receipts. Cameras captured every detail. The audience, mesmerized, watched as if it were a TV series. But the reality was even more brutal. Political allies walked away en masse. Senators who once drank at his parties declared their repudiation. Companies terminated contracts. Banks froze assets. Fortunes turned to dust in the public eye. The tycoon who once held power was now a condemned political ghost. Clara asked the press to remain silent, but she didn't defend her husband. She simply said that justice must take its course. It was the final blow. Even his family abandoned him. This intimate betrayal sealed the magnate's solitude. There was no longer any refuge, only the spotlight that exposed him. Social media overflowed with videos, memes, and hashtags. Young people shared his image with mocking phrases. The fall of a billion-dollar empire became a popular spectacle. The dirty fortune, built over decades, was now the butt of jokes after just a few seconds of going viral. International investors scrambled for cover. Funds from Dubai, London, and Tokyo announced immediate cuts. The Whitford name was too toxic. Washington, which had always embraced him, now isolated him. His global fortune evaporated, leaving only debt and broken promises. Meanwhile, protests grew. Crowds surrounded the capital, demanding exemplary punishment. They chanted for transparency and held banners with his face crossed out. The Tycoon became a symbol of national corruption. His downfall was not just personal, but political. The entire country was fueled by his ruin. An emergency report was presented to Congress. It detailed evidence linking Aaron to fraudulent contracts. The document went viral within minutes. It was the final signature of his public sentence. The conspiracy that began behind the scenes was now officially enshrined in the nation's records. Investigative newspapers uncovered more. Correspondence revealed that he bribed not only senators, but also members of the courts. The scandal grew larger by the hour. The fortune wasn't just dirty, it was radioactive. Anyone who touched it fell with it. The Tycoon dragged everything down with him. Aaron tried to speak on television. He gave an exclusive interview, trying to change his image. But every word sounded rehearsed, every gesture false. The public no longer believed him. The Tycoon had lost his most valuable asset, trust. Without it, no fortune could sustain him. Inside the mansion, Clara gathered her belongings. She had decided to leave her husband for good. With her children by her side, she left without looking back. For Aaron, seeing his family disappear was worse than any headline. It confirmed that betrayal corroded even the most intimate bonds. Personal accounts were frozen, cards were blocked, safes were sealed, and vehicles were seized. He who had lived in luxury now depended on lawyers for basic expenses. The shock was devastating. His golden fortune was turning into a financial prison, and the Tycoon no longer had purchasing power. The media was unforgiving. Late-night shows explored every detail of his life. They interviewed former employees, ex-lovers, political enemies. Everyone had a story to tell. The empire of secrets became entertainment fodder. The Tycoon was no longer a man, he was a spectacle. The burial of his reputation was sealed by a symbolic scene. A street artist painted a mural in front of the Capitol, a golden vault opening, releasing black smoke. In the center, Aaron's face, distorted by fire. The work went viral, becoming an icon of his downfall. The public funeral had no coffin, but headlines. People talked about him as if he were dead. "Whitford is finished," they said in Washington coffee shops. The Tycoon, alive, attended his own social burial. Every word echoed like a shovel of dirt on his memory. International investigations continued. Swiss and British authorities confirmed account freezes. Paris and Madrid announced cooperation. The fortune Aaron believed was protected overseas evaporated. The global network that sustained his power was now a hanging net. He tried to visit former allies, but none opened the door. The man who once drew crowds now walked alone. Washington had turned its back on him. It was the end of a cycle, from revered tycoon to social pariah, collective betrayal complete. The empire was nothing but ruins. The cameras still followed him, but not with respect. Now they were there to humiliate. Every step recorded, every look of despair. Aaron realized there was no longer anonymity, only exposure. The man who built his fortune on secrets was now a prisoner of his own image. The cell was no ordinary one. Due to political pressure, Aaron had been taken to a special prison, clean, with pale walls and minimal furniture. There was even a small bookshelf and a polished wooden desk. But this false luxury was a cruel irony, the gilded prison of a disgraced tycoon. He would spend hours staring at the gold-painted railings, an aesthetic detail meant to symbolize status, but for him, they were even heavier chains. The wealth that once bought him mansions and power now offered him only gleaming railings. It was the perfect portrait of his decadence. The silence was unbearable. In the hallways, footsteps echoed like hammers. Every noise seemed like a threat, every shadow a conspiracy. Aaron was no longer sleeping well. He saw figures in the walls, heard the voices of allies who had betrayed him. His mind became a stage for real nightmares, fueled by guilt and fear. Sometimes he would get up in the middle of the night and write letters. Pleas for forgiveness to Clara, attempts to explain himself to his children, but he would tear them up immediately. He knew no words could erase secrets once revealed. The torn paper on the floor was a metaphor for his shattered fortune. His paranoia grew with each visit from lawyers. He believed even they were against him. He questioned every look, every sentence. "Are you going to betray me too?" he asked, staring intently. Loyalty was a non-existent concept in his mind. He had learned betrayal is not the exception, it's the rule in the empire of dirty money. His body began to wither. Without the lavish dinners or expensive wines, Aaron seemed like a different man. His impeccable suit was replaced by simple clothes. His face, once a symbol of power, was now a mask of defeat. The Tycoon was no more. All that remained was a broken prisoner. The newspapers called it the Golden Cell. Cameras captured images whenever he appeared in court. Society watched as if it were a reality show. The gilded prison became a spectacle, and Aaron, once again, a consumer product. But now, sold as an example of ruin. The nights were worse. He dreamed of safes opening, contracts catching fire, Clara walking away hand in hand with her children. He woke sweating, with the feeling of being watched. There was no escape. Even in his dreams, the lost fortune and the exposed secrets haunted him. He tried to convince himself there was still a way out. He planned to appeal, considered negotiations, and sought legal loopholes, but deep down he knew it was futile. His prison wasn't just physical, it was social and psychological. The empire he'd built was now a cell in his own mind. One day, he received a newspaper clipping in the mail. The photo showed Clara smiling with her children on a trip. The message was wordless, but clear. Life went on without him. That hurt more than any judgment. The Tycoon realized there was no going back home. In the Golden Cell, Aaron finally understood the weight of his filthy fortune. Money gave him power, but it robbed him of everything that mattered. Friends, family, respect. Only loneliness and paranoia remained, and in that gilded prison, the Tycoon who believed himself untouchable discovered the truth. Luxury saves no one. In the Golden Cell, Aaron opened his eyes to a beam of light shining through the bars. He remembered the first time he'd stared at the open safe in his mansion, its black folders full of secrets. Now there was no fortune, only papers burned into memory. The beginning and the end became a reflection of each other. An officer entered silently and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of the same notebook the police had found months earlier, the one that had opened the trail of dirty money. Aaron touched the leather cover with trembling hands. It was like holding the ghost of his own destruction. Outside, the press announced the verdict. Sentenced to decades in prison for corruption and money laundering. The headline echoed like funeral bells. The man who once controlled Washington was now a model of ruin. The cycle was complete. Secrets became evidence. Fortune became conviction. Aaron closed his eyes and recalled the lavish dinners, the parties in mansions, the toasts with senators. Every smile hid betrayal, every contract concealed corruption. He realized too late, fortune was never treasure, but poison. The price of dirty money is always paid with one's own soul. As the cell closed, the press camera captured its last image. a solitary tycoon sitting under the pale light, surrounded by golden bars. It was the same man from the opening scene, but broke, without an empire. The dirty money trail had ended, and, as always, the truth prevailed. Aaron Whitford's story isn't just about the downfall of a tycoon. It's about how fortune, when built on corruption and secrecy, becomes a trap. Luxury, power, influence, all seemed untouchable, but dirty money always leaves a trail, and every trail inevitably leads to collapse. In Washington, many still try to follow the same path. Shady deals, illegal contracts, political betrayals, but the lesson is clear. Greed doesn't protect, it destroys. What begins as a gilded empire ends as a gilded prison. Power can buy silence, but it never buys oblivion. Morality is simple and relentless. Secrets always come to light. The fortune that seemed like a blessing became a curse. The man who seemed untouchable became a model of ruin. And in the end, it wasn't the shackles that held him captive, but his own choices. The greatest betrayal was against himself. You might wonder, how many Aarons still exist in the world? How many empires shine in public but hide shadows behind them? That's the question that remains. The dirty money trail doesn't end here. It repeats itself on every corner where greed speaks louder than truth. If you've stuck around this far, it's because you know that stories like this reveal more than scandals. They reveal the price of corruption. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video. Because here, hidden fortunes always come to light, and the next revelation could be even more shocking.